Hello everyone, this is the second part of my Kangxi video, so I strongly recommend watching part 1 if you haven't already, as to catch up with the timeline. Links in the description below. At only 15 years old, Kangxi successfully took charge of the Qing Dynasty. He crushed a Han-Chinese rebellion and integrated Taiwan into Chinese territory. As he was making reforms which allowed the economy to grow, border conflicts with the expanding Russian nation appeared. Since the Russians were determined not to leave Manchuria, it seemed as if the young emperor would have to go to war again. Kangxi was resolved to end the border conflicts with Russia once and for all, and since much of the fighting would be conducted over the Amur River, the Chinese emperor decided to mobilize 500 Tongpaiying soldiers from Taiwan who specialized in naval combat. In addition, some 200 Korean handgunners were recruited from the Korean Joseon dynasty, which was a vassal of the Qing. In preparation for the fight, Kangxi had the region and enemy position carefully scouted. The campaigns began in 1685, when the Qing besieged the settlement of Albazino by the Amur River, where about 600 Cossacks were entrenched. The Qing strategy was not annihilation, but subjugation. The Qing general sent an envoy to the fortress to ask for a surrender. Although outnumbered, the Russians refused. There would be battle. The Qing forces deployed and set up barricades and positioned their artillery. After hours of constant bombarding from Qing cannons, inflicting tens and tens of casualties on the Russians, Kangxi's forces changed strategy. Since the walls of the Albazino fortress were made of wood, the Qing decided to attack by fire. After preparing bundles of timber and disposing them around the fortress walls, fire was set. The Cossack leader had no choice but to surrender, apparently pressured by the head of the local monastery. Sources from both sides indicate that the Qing army showed mercy. Under the promise of staying peaceful from now on, the remaining Russians were spared. The Qing forces razed to the ground all the Russian fortifications and left the frozen tigers of Siberia. However, immediately after the Qing army had withdrawn, the Russians, who had just met reinforcements, violated the understanding by returning to the site of Albazino, reorganizing and rebuilding the walls around the settlement in clay earth to withstand fire. Later, the Russian raiders took up arms and forcefully subdued the local natives as they had done so before. The next year, in 1686, the Qing forces returned to the new Russian settlement of Albazino. This time, the town had a garrison of more than 800 Cossacks. Once more, the Qing offered to spare them if they surrendered immediately, but the Russians refused. For weeks, the Qing were unable to inflict significant damage, while the Russians caused serious casualties to them. After months of unbreakable siege, 2 diplomats from Moscow reached Beijing to negotiate, and Emperor Kangxi ordered the siege to be halted. By then, practically all of the Cossacks had died, with only about 40 still alive. To negotiate with the foreigners, Kangxi relied largely on Jesuit priests for translations, strengthening his good opinion of them. Before the Russian-Chinese border conflict could be resolved, a new war erupted locally between 2 Mongol native tribes, the Khalkha and the Dzungars. The Khalkha had murdered the Dzungar Khan's brother, and the conflict had escalated into war. In the eyes of Kangxi, this new conflict was an occasion to conquer Mongolia. In 1689, the border conflicts with Russia came to an end when the Treaty of Nerchinsk was signed. It set the Amur River as a defining border between the 2 realms. The Cossacks were to abandon all claims south of the river, and the town of Albazino was to be evacuated and destroyed. Peace was restored, and trade between Russia and China resumed and was even facilitated. Yet another military and political success for the 35-year-old Kangxi. In this new conflict between the Dzungar Mongols and the Khalkha tribe, the latter, losing the conflict, fled out of Mongolia and sought refuge in Inner Mongolia. They then requested help from the Qing. This was the perfect opportunity for Kangxi to subjugate all of Mongolia. By 1690, not even a year after the end of the Russian problem, the Qing forces were once again mobilized against the Dzungar Mongols, led by Galdan Khan. The Dzungars moved towards Beijing, and as they were crossing Inner Mongolia, they were ambushed by the Qing and Khalkha army. This was the Battle of Ulan-Totong. Galdan Khan of the Dzungars inflicted heavy casualties on Kangxi's force, but because the Dzungars were vastly outnumbered 5-1, he took the decision of a strategic retreat into the hills. Tactically, the Qing had lost the battle. As the conflict stagnated, negotiations began. The Halha tribe agreed to become vassals of the Qing, and the Dzungars tried to forge alliances. None of the other Mongols would however commit, and after the Dzungars even tried to request help from the Russians who refused, they found themselves alone. Meanwhile, the peace talks came to nothing, and war would resume. The Qing forces would this time fight in a new terrain, as the scorching Gobi Desert had to be crossed. In 1696, they mobilized. After days of expedition, the Qing forces arrived on the other side of the body of sand, exhausted by the journey and low on supply. The Mongol Dzungar forces, led by Galdan Khan, was composed mainly of camel cavalry, perfect for the climate, and although still outnumbered, the Mongols knew the terrain well and were fresh. Emperor Kangxi, who was personally leading the Qing army, had divided his forces into three main groups. His vanguard, counting about 40,000 soldiers, was to engage in battle with the Mongol tribe. The second, where Kangxi would command, was composed of 30,000 soldiers and artillery transported by camels. This second group would attack in turn from another flank. A third and final detachment of about 10,000 soldiers would reinforce in case of need. In June 1696, the Battle of Jiaomotuo could take place. Galdan's Dzungar forces were rapidly overwhelmed, harassed by the Qing cannons and Manchu cavalry. Practically all of the Mongols were killed. Galdan was able to escape into the Altai mountains with a handful of soldiers, but died shortly after. The Dzungar Khanate was not completely defeated, but all of Mongolia was now under Qing rule. The north and west were now in stable hands of the Manchu rulers. Tensions, however, arose in the southeast with Tibet. The mountainous nation was under the Mongol rule of the Khoshut tribe. This tribe had converted to Tibetan Buddhism and sworn protection of the state to the 5th Dalai Lama, who accepted its military administration. In 1701, a territorial dispute emerged between the Khoshuts and the Qing dynasty concerning the town of Dartsedo, or modern-day Kangding. While this city was nominally part of the Qing Empire, it was de facto controlled by Tibet. It was of great economic importance as it was a major town on the Tea Horse Road, a commercial network in the region. Realizing that the Chinese would want to reclaim the city, the Tibetans sent thousands of soldiers into Dartsedo. In turn, Kangxi requested from the regent of Tibet the relinquishing of Tibetan sovereignty over the area and the evacuation of the soldiers. After his refusal, Kangxi mobilized thousands of Manchu soldiers and easily took control of the town. In retaliation and to prevent a subsequent uprising, many Tibetan men from the area were executed. Besides from the military, Kangxi attached importance to culture and administration. He was determined to appear to the Han Chinese not as a conqueror, but as a benevolent leader. Since the 1670s, he had indulged in profound studies of Confucianism and Neo-Confucianism, recruiting famous scholars as tutors. At the same period, he took teachers to instruct him in the art of calligraphy. Furthermore, rather than staying constantly in the imperial city, Kangxi made several southern tours in 1684, 1689, 1699, 1703, 1705 and 1707. Every time, he made sure to only have a small retinue and avoided flamboyant receptions. He himself declared that he was diligently seeking the hidden suffering of the people and not here for the enjoyment of river and lake scenery. While on his tours, he would regularly reward soldiers and workers, pardon criminals, offer gifts to officials, and visit Buddhist sites and monasteries. This behavior led many Westerners to consider him an enlightened despot. Most Western contact with China passed through the Jesuits, which Kangxi held in high esteem for their respective local culture and knowledge of science. Through them, he could communicate with Western rulers, such as Louis XIV of France. But around the turn of the 17th century, the Franciscan and Dominican orders also began to spread in China, to the Portuguese base of Macau. These two branches of Catholicism were far less tolerant of indigenous culture, as were the Jesuits. They argued that Confucian practices were incompatible with Christianity and even heretic. The Jesuits converted Chinese people, and even Emperor Kangxi himself disagreed. To settle the issue, Pope Clement XI sent a papal legate, Charles Thomas Maillard de Tournon, to travel to China, report on the situation, and work to abolish the Confucian rites. He arrived in Macau in 1704 and was well received by Kangxi. However, when the emperor discovered the Holy See's intention, he was infuriated. Under the threat of expelling all of the missionaries, he obtained their promise not to follow the Pope's will. That same year, in 1704, the Vatican officially declared that Confucian rites were indeed heretic. Papal legate Charles Thomas, upon learning of the decision, travelled to Nanjing, where many missionaries worked. There, he issued in 1707 a decree to abolish the rites on the pain of excommunication. The Qing Emperor was outraged. He immediately had Charles Thomas arrested and imprisoned in Macau, and sent for some missionaries to the Vatican to protest the decree. A century of work of Jesuit priests was slowly starting to crumble, as Kangxi began distrusting Christianity. In an effort to facilitate literacy and scholar work, Kangxi ordered a great dictionary of all Chinese characters to be compiled. Work started in 1710, and by the time it was completed in 1716, the great piece of work contained over 47,000 characters. After writing the preface himself, the emperor had the dictionary published. Political changes would however lead Kangxi to indulge in one last conquest. In 1717, the Dzungars successfully overthrew the Hoshut Mongols from Tibet, taking control over the region. Kangxi immediately ordered an expedition to chase them out, but the terrain made this logistically extremely difficult. By 1718, Qing forces descended from the north towards Lhasa, but crossing the harsh and deserted region depleted their food supplies. Before they arrived, they had to stop and forage the land. The Dzungar and their Tibetan allies, discovering their presence, attacked and besieged the Qing forces in their camp. With the help of local lamas, the Qing negotiated a ceasefire and their retreat back to Qing land. Although the Dzungar agreed, they violated the treaty and massacred them on the way back. Not losing patience, Kangxi prepared for another expedition in 1720. Instead of venturing alone in the mountains, he this time allied himself with two local Tibetan lords. Together, they fought the Dzungars, and after several battles, Lhasa was captured by the Chinese. The Dzungars were driven out of the Tibetan plateau. The Qing authorities organized the enthronement of the 7th Dalai Lama, who was friendly to their cause. Kangxi also stationed a permanent garrison in Lhasa. By 1721, Tibet had become a protectorate of the Qing Empire. Back on the Christian problem, after reading Pope Clement XI's official decree banning Confucian practices, Kangxi was fed up with the issue. While in 1692 he had stated that the Europeans are very quiet, they do not excite any disturbances in the provinces, nor do they harm anyone. They commit no crimes, and their doctrine has nothing in common with that of the false sects in the empire, nor has it any tendency to excite sedition. The emperor now decreed in 1721, "Reading this proclamation, I have concluded that the Westerners are petty indeed. It is impossible to reason with them, because they do not understand larger issues as we do understand them in China. I have never seen a document which contains so much nonsense. From now on, Westerners should not be allowed to preach in China to avoid further trouble. Christian missions in the country were now forbidden." The emperor had grown old. In 1722, at the age of 67, he organized a great banquet to celebrate 60 years of his reign. He had stabilized the nation, expanded its borders, and established contacts with many foreign nations, as well as set a good image of Manchu rule in the hearts of his subjects. Although he had designated his second of 35 sons, Yinrang, as crown prince, which was by the way a Chinese custom contrary to Manchu rules of equal right succession, it turned out the emperor's son was unfair, lustful, and generally incapable of ruling adequately. Furthermore, this led to great disputes within the emperor's family. Disappointed, Kangxi stripped his son of his title of crown prince in 1712 and refused to nominate a successor ever again. By the 20th of December 1722, Kangxi, who had fallen ill, summoned 7 of his sons at his bedside. His glorious reign was at an end. It was declared that Kangxi's 4th son, Yin Zhen, was to succeed his father. he would become Emperor Yongzheng. Kangxi's rule was the longest in Chinese history, and by far one of the most magnificent. He was an illustrious military leader, as well as a cunning political ruler and pragmatic administrator. Under his reign, China became huge, incorporating Taiwan, parts of Siberia, Mongolia and Tibet. The Qing Empire was now rich, populous and powerful. The High Qing era had begun. Thank you for watching my video, I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or requests, feel free to leave them in the comment section below.